Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webcast today. We appreciate you taking the time sharing with us. I am Matt Moore, the host for today's presentation. But with us, we have a special expert guest, Neil Murphy, and he's going to share some very important information regarding the ADAS technology. Hey, Neil, how you doing?
Hey, Matt, doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Perfect, perfect. Hey, Neil, would you take a moment and introduce yourself to everyone so we all know what your expertise and how you're going to move forward with the presentation?
Yeah, you got it. So, my name's Neil Murphy. I run the color science team at Axalta. So, I'm located in the Global Innovation Center in Philadelphia. And one of our most critical projects for the last few years has been implementing new paint technology to facilitate the use of sensors for self-driving cars. And specifically, radar is one of those. And for reasons we'll talk about, the signal has to travel through the paint. So that's been a really big deal for us, and I'm excited to share it with you today.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you for that. So, really, what are the objectives for this presentation? Really, what we want to do is introduce you to the ADAS technology, give you a general idea of what it's about and how it functions. Neil will cover all that. We're also going to take some time and make sure you know how to access the technical information and the guidelines that the manufacturers want you to follow. So, we're going to show you how to do that. But also, we want to make sure you know how to look and find what's relevant to what you're working on. We're also going to touch on the proper repair processes or preparation processes for these ADAS bumpers. We're also going to discuss the colors that are needed, how to find the proper color, and also how to refinish the bumper because it is different than a typical bumper in the past. Okay, and with that, what we'll do is we'll pass it on to Neil. He's going to share some important information.
All right, thanks, Matt. So moving into the content here. What is ADAS specifically? So ADAS stands for Advanced Driver Assistance Systems, and these things are everywhere. If you have adaptive cruise control on your vehicle, blind spot detection, anything like that, that counts as an ADAS system. And one of the techniques we're going to focus on that make these systems work is the 77 gigahertz radar system today. And so these systems can send their signal through the plastic of a bumper so they can be hidden behind the painted system. So the paint actually becomes part of that surface that is in front of the radar sensor. So these are critical safety systems and they're hidden all over the vehicle. And what we'll see is that different manufacturers use different strategies for implementing these. Um, Up in the top corner, we have some examples of different implementations where we see, Lexus has a special emblem that's radar transparent. VW and Tesla have a special painted surface where that can facilitate transmission. And then we have the generic cutout here where it's just a black plastic surface that's unpainted that allows for the signal transmission. So really the balance is between safety and aesthetics, where these are large sensors. So if we have 8 of them on the corners, the front and the back, we really can't have a cutout because there'd be so much room that is taken up for them. And so the long story short with formulating paints for radar is that the aluminum is a big problem. So we'll talk a little more about how to manage that aluminum and what's been done in Axalta to give the body shops options for paints to be used with these. So we'll see a quick graphic of all the sensors that are used. And I mean, there's a lot. There's radar, LiDAR, camera, ultrasound, any number of sensors to improve safety. And so you'll see this little, the reddish cloud here, these are all radar sensors. And so you have your long range sensors for adaptive cruise, seeing really far down the road. But then you have your short range sensors, and these will be on the corners of the vehicle. And Since they're on the corners, they're going to be hidden behind the plastic trim pieces, which will be painted. So this is where it's very important to manage the ingredients and the application conditions that these coatings are applied in. But the reason it's important is because these are very critical safety systems. So primarily pedestrian detection, knowing that there's a pedestrian, knowing their location and their distance, and being able to stop in time is the critical scenario. So if we see in this scenario A, scenario B chart down here, essentially, in this situation where there's 100% transmission through the coated bumper, the detection distance where the car can see the pedestrian is greater than the stopping distance. So in this case, there's adequate time for the vehicle to stop and everyone's safe. In scenario B, let's say there's 80% transmission for a given system and you don't detect the pedestrian in time to stop, which could lead to a potential issue. So again, it's very important that these systems are properly transparent to the radar signal to allow for safe operation for both pedestrians and drivers. So kind of a zoomed in view of what's going on behind the bumper. On the far right side, we'll see this little block here. It's sort of what the radar sensor looks like behind the bumper. And these sensors are usually maybe the size of a deck of cards, a little bigger. And what it's going to do is it's going to emit signal through the coated bumper. It's going to bounce off of a detected object, a beautiful red vehicle in this case, and then it's going to bounce back through the bumper assembly and then into the sensor. So in the full total, it's going to travel through twice. So the components and their thicknesses are very important for what signal gets through and what signal is blocked.
All right, we're on to our first poll question. What is the primary reason for ADAS? A, convenience. 2, auto start the vehicle. C, safety. D, none are correct. We'll give you a few moments to answer the question again. What is the primary reason for ADAS? Convenience, to auto start the vehicle, safety, or none are correct? All right, just a few moments more here. And the correct answer is actually C, safety. Great job. We have 100% accuracy on the answer. So good job, everyone. Okay, we're going to continue on here. If you have any questions or comments, please enter those in the chat. We will address them as they come in, and we do appreciate your participation. All right, let's take a moment and discuss technical documentation. Obviously, getting these bumpers right is important, and we need to know where to find that information. There are several different sources you can access. For example, you can go to Axalta Support, and we can help you. We actually, and Neil will point this out, that we're going to be sending out information out to be proactive and help you. And again, Neil will touch on that shortly. But also you can go to ICAR. ICAR is a good source for finding this information. But really when it boils down to it, if you want the most accurate information, most reliable information, you should be going to the manufacturer's technical website. Here you can find all the information, and this will ensure that you get the information you need to correctly repair an ADAS bumper. Again, there are other sources, but this would be the best source. Now, once you go to the website and you access the information, what are you looking for? It's going to be a little bit overwhelming potentially. What you're looking for are specifics related to the task at hand, and that is prepping a bumper, mixing the color, selecting the color, should say selecting and then mixing the color, applying it. There are specific details for every manufacturer, and you want to make sure that you're using Toyota recommendations for a Toyota bumper, Honda recommendations for Honda, and so forth. Things you should be looking for example, is the bumper even paintable? Some situations and some manufacturers say, no, you must replace the bumper. Also, some might say, well, you can refinish it one time. Others might say as many as 3 times. So I think you get the point. You want to make sure you study this, understand specifically what needs to be done for the specific manufacturer, and then move forward. All right, we're on to our next poll question. What source is best for finding ADAS repair information? A, aftermarket part supplier. B, manufacturer's website. C, paint distributor. D, all are correct. Again, what source is best for finding ADAS repair information? Aftermarket part supplier, manufacturer's website, paint distributor, or all answers are correct. We'll give you a few moments to answer the question. All right, correct answer is B. Again, everybody did a great job on that. And we will continue on, and I'll pass it back to Neil.
Right. So I think Matt made a really important point with the discussion of the manufacturer specifications because there's many different locations for these components and there's many different ways they need to be treated. So definitely something critical to keep in mind. But moving on to what goes into the can of paint and what application conditions need to be followed. This is where a lot of the work we've done behind the scenes comes in. And so these formulas are required because aluminum will reflect and absorb the radar signal so it won't travel through the bumper. And the reason it does that is because it has a very high something called permittivity, and essentially it's a very conductive material. And just like if you use aluminum in your microwave, you're going to have bad results. The frequencies used by the radar sensors have a similar frequency to microwaves, and so it'll result in signal loss and degradation of performance. So aluminum is the number one ingredient to manage and be aware of when doing ADAS related repairs. Another thing is that it's very critical to not alter the amount of aluminum in these formulas, since we work directly with the manufacturers to approve them, and we are able to meet their radar requirements for a given thickness that they specify. So again, it's important to not tint these and to be very aware of the thickness that is applied. And if we see in this chart here, it just so happens that the base coat is the most likely to cause signal loss, and that is due to the fact that they can have very large amounts of aluminum. So many of the formulas that have been approved have specific amounts of aluminum that are tailored to the manufacturer's specifications. So if we get into why aluminum is a big problem, really it's because it's highly conductive. So the same properties that give us that appealing sparkle and texture also cause the transmission to be degraded for radar signal. So if we look, not all alumins are necessarily created equal with respect to radar. So here we have 4 different classes of aluminum. So we have cornflake, silver dollar, thin milled, and PVD. And really the biggest problem you see with this very severe slope shown in this purple chart here is we get a very large response to the radar signal attenuation based on the amount of aluminum in the formula. So we've done all this work at Axalta Research and Development to understand the role of each aluminum and tailor the amount specifically so we can meet the appearance criteria while still allowing for a safe radar operation. So how does this all play into the formula retrieval scenario? So when you're looking for a ADAS repair formula, the first thing you'll do is no different than any other scenario where you'll look up the manufacturer and the paint code, and then you'll look it up on ColorNet, and then you'll find the associated formula. But in this case, you need an ADAS recommended formula. And so the most important thing to do is make sure this radar option is active. And so if you look, you'll see when you look up the formula, and I believe this is a Toyota formula. And what we'll see is this little vehicle with the Wi-Fi signal, kind of, or it's really supposed to be a radar signal, but this little vehicle will denote that it's a radar acceptable formula and has been improved by the manufacturer.
The question is, ADAS formulas can be tinted if A, they can never be tinted, B, the painter never exceeds more than 50 grams of silver, C, the proper ground color is applied, D, all answers are correct. Again, ADAS formulas can be tinted. A, they can never be tinted. B, the painter never exceeds 50 grams of silver. C, the proper ground color is used. D, all answers are correct. We'll give you a few moments to answer the question. All right, we're winding down here. And the correct answer is A, they can never be tinted. Doesn't matter the ground color you use. It doesn't, nothing matters. It all boils down to you must use an ADAS formula, and that formula cannot be modified. They've been specifically developed with the proper functionality of the radar technology, and any modification to that formula, whether it be metallic or anything else, will have an influence and impact and diminish the functionality and won't properly work. So we have to avoid that. Okay, let's continue on here and on to the actual repair process, prepping a bumper. This is important. We have to make sure, again, we can't treat an ADAS bumper the way we would treat a regular bumper that comes in and out of the shop on a routine basis. First of all, we need to make sure that we confirm the bumper's even repairable. How do we do that? Again, we access that information that is supplied by the manufacturer or some other reliable source. Once we know the bumper can be repaired, we have to follow the manufacturer's recommendations step by step. No exceptions. And we'll cover some of those details here shortly. Also, it's important to remember that the manufacturer decides whether a bumper can be repaired, and they also dictate the process for prepping the bumper, and they also dictate what can be used on the bumper. They're the ultimate authority. So let's take a look at some details. Now, here we want to point out some general guidelines when it comes to prepping a bumper. You always must refer to the manufacturer of that vehicle for specific recommendations and guidelines for prepping a bumper. But generally speaking, when it comes to prepping an ADAS bumper, you're going to start with 1,000 grit or finer. They typically do not want you to break through the clear coat. By breaking through the clear coat, we cause issues related to the functionality of the radar technology. Again, generally speaking, no primer, no filler of any kind in the radar area. Now, when I say this, keep in mind, the bumper itself is not a complete radar. There's portions, as Neil pointed out, specific areas of the bumper that have the radar technology built in. So some manufacturers will allow certain repairs on the bumper if it's not going to impact the radar. But you'll only know that by referring to the manufacturer of that vehicle for specific guidelines. Okay, let's continue on here. We're on to our next poll question. Who determines if an ADAS bumper is repairable? The shop technician, the insurance company, the manufacturer, or all answers are correct? Again, who determines if an ADAS bumper is repairable? The shop technician, the insurance company, the manufacturer, all answers are correct. We'll give you just a few moments to answer the question. All right, we're winding down. The correct answer is the manufacturer. It's always the manufacturer. We can't, at the shop level, decide how we're going to approach this bumper. We have to follow the manufacturer's guidelines specifically, and at no point can anybody override that, including the insurance companies. Remember, this is about safety. That's the number one priority here. We're dealing with a safety component, and we have to adhere to the manufacturer's recommendation. All right, we're going to continue on here, and we are on to color prep. Now, when it comes to color prep, there's certain things you need to be aware of. Neil already touched on the fact that we have to use ADAS formulas exclusively on ADAS parts. But also, you want to be aware of there are specific requirements when it comes to the products that are going to be used on the bumpers. Now, the good news is that when it comes to Axalta, the Speedstacker High Tech, Chromex Pro, and Stando Blue are usually going to be recommended for all of these ADAS repairs. Now, specifically what you're looking at on the screen is an example. This is a Nissan example, and they have a certain color formula or paint code that is used. It's not every color that is going to be produced by the manufacturer. It's only certain models with certain paint formulas. And these colors will be used on the vehicle, but again, it is product specific. You have to make sure that you're using the products that the manufacturer is recommending or requiring, I should say, for the ADAS repair. You just can't use any particular product that you feel like. We've got actually some questions here. So let's take a look at the questions. First question is, how is ADAS formula option turned on in ColorNet? Yeah, great question. What happens is you'll need to go into settings in either ColorNet 2.0 or ColorNet Cloud, and there you can access the toggle on the ADAS radar formulas. Now, if you're not familiar with how to do this, contact your local rep, contact Axalta Tech Support. We can walk you through it. It's very, very simple. It won't usually be on active automatically, I think, as of now, but that probably will happen in the future. Neil, do you have a comment on that? Do you know if they're going to, in ColorNet Cloud, is it automatically being activated, or is it something that has to be done by the user still at this point?
I'm not too sure. I think subsequent updates should include it, but it's ongoing.
Okay. That's my understanding also. So again, if you're not finding it activated, just get a hold of your local rep or just pop into settings and make the adjustment. It's not very hard to do. Pick up the phone. We can help you. We'll walk you through it. All right. We're going to move on to the next slide here. And Neil will explain some information about some additional radar technology.
All right, thank you. So, radar are directly behind bumpers, which are painted. There is another sensor that is also painted, and these are the ultrasonic sensors. And so these, while the performance criteria aren't as stringent as radar, they shouldn't be forgotten. And so you'll see these small sensors, they're typically about 3/4 of an inch in diameter, and they kind of have a circular cutout on the bumper. They're typically painted, and they, some manufacturers will allow for this painting. Others will, send you pre-painted sensors that match the color. But it's possible that painting these may compromise the performance. So again, please check with the manufacturer's rules to see if these sensors are also allowed to be coated. An additional general best practice to adhere to is avoiding shading directly in the vicinity of the sensor. That's not to say shading isn't allowed anywhere on the bumper. It's just not allowed in the vicinity of the sensor. And again, the manufacturer's guidelines will show you where this bumper or where the radar equipment is located on the bumper. But the reason that the general blending is not allowed is you can get this sort of wedge-shaped film thickness, and that will give you kind of an error in the way the signal is received, since the sensor will be able to see where the radar sensor is, or see where the vehicle is on the road. Having this slope in the film thickness may cause kind of a lensing effect, which would distort the sensor's interpretation of where the vehicle is. So very important to maintain a continuous thickness over the sensor area. And then again, the film build must meet manufacturer spec, and the amount of times that a bumper can be repaired is also subject to manufacturer limitations.
All right, excellent. We are going to move on to our next poll question here. And the question is, what paint products can be used on an ADAS bumper? Any waterborne paint, any solvent-based paint. The auto manufacturer recommends or determines the allowable products. D, none are correct. Again, what paint products can be used on ADAS bumpers? Any waterborne paint, only solvent-based paint. The manufacturer determines allowable products. D, all are correct. All right, we'll give you a few moments here. All right, we're going to wind down here, and the correct answer is it's always the manufacturer. Again, very strict guidelines because we're dealing with safety here. So we don't just take any product and spray it. Make sure you're using products that are allowed by the manufacturer so we make sure we're maintaining proper functionality of the radar technology. Very good. We'll move on here. All right, so let's take a look at a question here. For turning on radar compliant formulas in ColorNet 2.0, go to Systems, click on Retrieval Options, and the Activate Radar Compliant checkbox is located on the Options tab. Very good information, Scott. We appreciate that. Again, you might want to take a shot of that with your phone or something if you can see the information. If not, contact your local rep, and we will be more than happy to assist you with that. All right. We're going to start winding things down here. We do want to take a moment and talk about everything, just put it all back together here and key points we do need to remember. So, Neil, when it comes to understanding and accessing ADAS information, what do you think would be the best approach for the technician in the shop?
Sure. I think, we have a technical bulletin that's coming out. I think that will provide some good ground rules for general best practices in, how to handle radar compatible refinish. And then beyond that, it would be, checking out documentation from the specific OEMs. And it's even as granular as checking out the documentations for a specific make and model. A premium trim package vehicle may actually have more radar sensors than a base model vehicle, things like that. So always good to double check before any paint is applied.
All right, excellent. Yeah, I agree 100%. It's nice that Axalta is being proactive, but also it's important that the technician needs to be proactive to make sure we're getting this information and repairing these bumpers correctly. Excellent. Now, again, when it comes to these bumpers, key point to remember is we're only using ADAS formulas. We can't go off and just choose a random color, and nor can we modify a formula for that spray operation for ADAS because it will lead to issues for reliability of the ADAS. Now, when it comes to ADAS products, remember, make sure you're looking at the technical information that is supplied to you and using the products that are recommended by the manufacturer or required by the manufacturers. And that also includes making sure you're prepping these bumpers the way they're supposed to be prepped per the manufacturer's guidelines. Now, Neil, do you expect maybe in the future there to be some standardization when it comes to the repair refinish process for ADAS technology, or do you think that it's going to be pretty much every manufacturer is going to stay with their own recommendations and guidelines?
Yeah, I do feel that, at least for the time being, things will be a bit different between manufacturers. But there are some efforts, especially in Germany and whatnot, where there are professional groups kind of seeing what the sort of standards should be and coming up with best practices so that there's alignment between different manufacturers. But if you look at it, it is a very complex scenario because all of these different manufacturers are sort of in competition with one another to have the best advanced driver assistance systems possible. So they're always pushing the limit. And as the capabilities increase, the standards increase due to the fact that you need all the signal you can get, so you can't necessarily afford to lose it from the paint. So it really is an evolving topic.
Yeah, excellent. And I think you nailed it. It really is competition, and everybody's trying to do what they can to attract a customer. So we'll see how it all plays out. It would be nice if there's standardization. Time will tell. So, Tom, do we have any questions that need to be posted? All right. So we actually do. Question is all data a good source to use to double check on those correct repairs? I would say yes. And at the end of the day, if you're not confident with the information you're getting from any source, again, we'll always refer you back to the manufacturer because, again, as we're pointing out, there is no standardization here. We can't assume that Toyota's recommendations or requirement guidelines are going to be consistent with Nissan's or anybody else. So, if in doubt, always go back to the manufacturer. If you're confident that the information you're receiving for the repair and refinish is reliable, then of course we would say move forward. For example, if you're getting the information from Axalta, I'd be confident in that information. So yes, all data is a reliable source. If you're confident with that, you should be okay. All right. So we're going to shift gears here. We want to give you an update regarding refinish support. And we realized that there's a lot of information out there and it wasn't always convenient to access. So what we decided to do was to create a web page, a one source, one contact location, so you can find everything easily. Now, if you scan the QR code in the upper right corner and save this on your phone, or you can type in the web address on the page here, save it on your computer. This will take you to our web page support where you can access either through text, chat, you can make a phone call. If it's nothing that's important right away, you can email us or you can simply browse on your own. But all of the information for color support, technical support is here, and you can easily get your questions or resolved quickly without waiting for somebody to come to the shop. Now, sometimes you might need somebody to come shop. Maybe you didn't get the results you wanted from the web page. If that's the case, what we will do is reach out to the local rep, and then he or she will schedule time and meet you at the shop face to face and assist you. So again, very nice, very convenient way to access technical information via phone support or text, email, and we hope you find this helpful as needed. Now, with that, we want to say thank you very much for attending today's session.